The first snow came early that year. Not enough to close roads. Not enough to cancel work. Just enough to erase footprints. On October 19th, 2016, at 6:42 a.m., 32-year-old Hannah Reed parked her silver sedan at the northern trailhead of Black Hollow State Forest. The lot was nearly empty. Two other vehicles sat at the far end, both dusted with a thin layer of frost that suggested their owners had arrived before dawn. The sky was low and heavy, the kind of gray that pressed down on the treetops and made distances impossible to judge. Hannah had texted her sister before stepping out of the car. "Back by sunset, just need my head clear." It was not unusual. After her divorce finalized 3 months earlier, Hannah had begun hiking alone. Long routes, isolated trails, areas where cell signal faded within minutes. Her family worried, but Hannah insisted the woods were the only place where the noise in her head finally went quiet. She signed the trail log at 6:49 a.m. Name: Hannah Reed. Route: North Loop to Ravens Cut. Estimated return: 7-8 hours. The ranger on duty later testified that she remembered Hannah clearly, not because anything seemed wrong, but because Hannah looked exhausted in a way sleep could not fix. Dark circles under her eyes, jaw clenched, the kind of face that carried thoughts no one else could see. At 7:03 a.m., Hannah stepped onto the trail. By 9:17 a.m., the weather changed. Wind rose without warning. The forest canopy began to creak and sway. Fine snow turned into heavier flakes. Visibility dropped, the kind of storm that didn't roar but suffocated. Sound became dull. Distance collapsed. Direction became a suggestion instead of a fact. At 11:40 a.m., Hannah's phone sent its last automatic location ping. It placed her just past Ravens Cut. After that, there was nothing. No calls. No messages. No movement. At 6:58 p.m., her sister called her phone for the 6th time. Straight to voicemail. At 8:12 p.m., a friend drove to Hannah's apartment. Lights off. Car gone. At 9:46 p.m., Black Hollow State Police were notified. Search and rescue was activated at 11:03 p.m. By then, the storm had buried the trail. By morning, the forest looked untouched, as if no one had ever walked there at all. The first search teams moved in at dawn. Dogs lost the scent within minutes. Helicopters couldn't fly low due to fog. Volunteers spread out in grid patterns, calling her name into trees that absorbed sound like fabric. They found nothing. Not a jacket. Not a boot print. Not a broken branch. Not a single trace that proved Hannah Reed had ever entered the forest. After 3 days, the case shifted. From rescue to recovery. Posters went up across 3 counties. Local news picked it up. Woman missing after solo hike. Her face appeared on screens. Still smiling. Still alive in photographs. While the forest stayed silent. But something else was happening. Something no one noticed. On the 2nd week of the search, a volunteer reported something strange. During a late-night briefing at the temporary command tent, a young woman sat quietly in the back row, hood up, face partially hidden. She did not sign in, she did not speak, she simply watched. When the volunteer asked another team member who she was, the answer was vague. Probably family. She's been here a few days. No idea. No one thought much of it. Because grief attracts strangers. And no one expects the missing to be sitting among those looking for them. By the 4th day, the command post had become a small, temporary town. White tents, portable heaters, long folding tables covered in maps, radios, coffee cups, and laminated search grids. Names were written in marker on a whiteboard. Team Alpha, Team Bravo, Canine Unit, Air Support. Hannah Reid's name was written at the top, underlined twice. The woman in the hood came back. Every day. Sometimes in the morning. Sometimes late at night. Always alone. She stood just outside the main tent, close enough to hear briefings, far enough to avoid being questioned. She never signed in, never took a radio, never picked up a search assignment. She simply watched. One volunteer, a retired firefighter named Mark Ellison, later said he noticed her on the 5th day. She stood too still, he told investigators years later. People who are scared or worried, they fidget. She didn't. It was like she was studying us. Mark approached her once, asked if she was family. The woman hesitated, just long enough for him to notice. "Friend," she said. Her voice was calm. Too calm. He asked her name. She said, "Hannah's friend." Not a name, just a description. Mark didn't push. Everyone was careful with grief. No one wanted to be the person who upset the wrong relative. But the dogs kept reacting to her. Twice, handlers reported their tracking dogs pulling briefly toward the edge of the camp instead of into the forest. The dogs would stop near where the hooded woman had been standing, circle, then lose interest. Handlers dismissed it. Too many scents. Too many people. Too much chaos. On day 7, a new development shifted everything. A volunteer found Hannah's scarf. Blue wool, wrapped around a low branch near Raven's Cut. It was not torn, not snagged. It looked placed, carefully folded once, hung at eye level, like a marker. The media surged. News vans arrived. Headlines changed. Missing hikers, belongings found. Hope returned. Then something stranger happened. During a press briefing, a reporter noticed the woman in the hood standing behind the cameras. The reporter later said the woman was crying. Not loud. No sobbing. Just silent tears. But her face was blank, as if her body was performing grief while her mind stayed somewhere else. The reporter took a photo. Not of Hannah, of the crowd. Weeks later, when the photo was published online, someone left a comment. That woman in the back looks just like Hannah Reid. At the time, no one took it seriously. Grief makes people see patterns. Faces. Ghosts. On day 11, search and rescue officially scaled back. After day 14, most volunteers went home. By day 21, only a skeleton crew remained. The forest reclaimed the noise. The tents came down. The boards were erased. Hannah's name was removed from the whiteboard. But the woman in the hood did not leave. A park ranger reported seeing her standing at the empty trailhead at night. Just standing, looking into the trees, as if waiting for something to come out. 3 months later, Hannah Reid was declared legally missing. Not dead, not alive, suspended in a space where time stops. Her sister kept her phone on, charged, waiting. For years, the forest went quiet, until something brought the case back. 5 years later, a college student named Evan Mercer was researching cold cases for a criminal psychology project. He focused on disappearances where the body was never found. Hannah Reid's case stood out, not for the lack of evidence, but for a single strange detail buried in an archived volunteer report. Unidentified female observer present at multiple briefings, not listed, possibly related to victim. Evan dug deeper. He requested footage from local stations. Old raw video. Press recordings, crowd shots. It took days, but he found her. The woman in the hood, standing in multiple clips. Different days, different angles, same posture, same face. Evan froze the frame, zoomed in, adjusted contrast, compared it to Hannah Reid's missing poster. Same cheekbones, same scar near the eyebrow, same eyes. It wasn't similar. It was identical. The timestamp on the footage was 3 days after Hannah vanished. The girl watching her own search. Evan sent the comparison to his professor. The professor thought it was a coincidence. Evan didn't. He filed a tip with state police. At first, they dismissed it. Then a detective pulled Hannah's dental records, her medical photos, her driver's license. The match was undeniable. The woman watching the search was Hannah Reid. But Hannah Reid had never been found, which meant either she had returned or she had never left. And no one noticed. State police reopened the case quietly. No press release, no public announcement, just a small internal task force, the kind used for cases that don't make sense. The first thing they did was pull every piece of video from the original search. Local news stations, volunteer phone footage, Park Service security cameras. They slowed it down, frame by frame. The woman appeared in at least 9 separate recordings, always in the background, never speaking, never interacting directly, never approaching cameras. She stayed just outside focus, like she knew where the lens couldn't quite see her clearly. Detective Laura Kincaid was assigned lead. She noticed something that made her stomach tighten. The woman's clothes never changed. Same dark hoodie, same jeans, same boots. Over a 3-week search. No variation. No laundry. No weather change. No signs of long-term camping. Which meant either she had access to clean replacements that looked identical, or she wasn't staying long enough to need them, or time wasn't affecting her the way it should. Laura tracked down volunteers who remembered her. Descriptions were consistent. Quiet, pale, distant, always watching. One volunteer said something that stayed in Laura's notes. She looked like someone pretending to be human. When Laura interviewed Hannah's sister, Rachel Reid, she showed her still frames. Rachel went silent, then started shaking. "That's her," Rachel said. "That's Hannah, that's my sister." Rachel insisted she would have known if Hannah had come back. They had searched together, cried together, lived with uncertainty together. Hannah never came home, never called, never sent a message, never showed up, which raised a worse possibility. What if Hannah was alive and chose not to return? Or worse, what if she did and no one recognized her? The team looked for financial records. No bank activity, no credit cards, no employment, no medical visits, no identity usage. It was as if Hannah Reid had existed only inside the forest. Then came another discovery. A forest ranger submitted a forgotten incident report from 2 years after the disappearance. Date November 3, 2018. A lone woman had been found sleeping inside an old maintenance shed deep in Black Hollow. No ID, no phone, no backpack. She claimed she was waiting. For what? She would not say. The ranger escorted her out. She walked back into the woods. The description matched. Height, hair, scar, vase. It was Hannah, still near the place she vanished. Still not leaving. Detective Kincaid requested access to restricted park records. Old maps, decommissioned structures, maintenance tunnels, abandoned ranger shelters. Something stood out. Black Hollow had been built over old logging routes, old firewatch bunkers, service tunnels, some sealed, some forgotten, some marked as inaccessible, but not verified. Laura began to think Hannah had not simply vanished. She had gone somewhere people didn't look. Somewhere under. Somewhere between. Then came the call that changed everything. A woman had been brought into a small clinic in a town 60 miles away. Hypothermia. Severe malnutrition. Dehydration. The nurse thought she recognized her from an old missing person poster. Detective Kincaid drove through the night. When she arrived, the woman was asleep. Thin, hollow-eyed, older, but alive. Laura waited until she woke. The woman looked at her. Not confused, not scared, not relieved, just tired. "What's your name?" Laura asked. The woman paused, then said Hannah. But when Laura asked where she had been, Hannah said something that made the room feel colder. "I've been right there the whole time." Hannah refused to leave the clinic room for 2 days. Not because she was weak, but because she was afraid of what she would see outside. She kept asking the same question. Is it still snowing? It was late summer. The nurse answered carefully. No, it's warm outside. Hannah closed her eyes. That's wrong, she whispered. It's always snowing. Detective Kincaid sat with her for hours. At first, Hannah spoke in fragments. Disconnected sentences. Half-formed memories. She described walking the trail. The wind rising. The snow swallowing the path. Then she described something else. Not in police language. Not in logical sequence. She said the forest went quiet in a way that hurt. She said the snow didn't just fall. It listened. When Laura asked what she meant, Hannah said it was waiting for me to stop moving. Search teams had never found her footprints. Now Hannah explained why. She never stayed on the surface long. She found something. An opening. Not a cave. Not a tunnel. A place where the forest bent inward. She said the air was warmer there. Not warm, but not killing. She crawled. She fell. She kept going. And then, time stopped behaving. Days felt like hours. Hours felt like weeks. She said she could hear people above her, calling her name, walking over her, standing right on top of her. But the sound came through like it was underwater. Muffled, distorted. She said she tried to scream, but her voice never reached the surface. So she learned to listen. She learned the rhythms of the search. When helicopters came, when dogs came, when people gave up for the night. She learned when it was safe to come up. That was when she watched. From behind trees, from the edge of camps, from places no one thought to look. Detective Kincaid asked the question that had been building. Why didn't you walk up to them? Hannah's answer was immediate. They weren't the same people anymore. Laura didn't understand. Hannah tried to explain. At first they were real, they were warm, they were loud, they were alive. Then they started changing. What do you mean? Laura asked. Hannah swallowed. The longer they stayed in the woods, the quieter they got. Their faces went blank. They walked slower. They stopped looking at each other. They started looking like the forest. Laura assumed trauma, dissociation, psychosis, until Hannah said something else. There were people searching for me who weren't people anymore. Laura asked her to clarify. Hannah shook her head. You can't tell from far away, but when they get close, you can see it. See what? They don't blink enough. They don't breathe like they're tired. They don't react to the cold. They just move and look and wait. Hannah said she stopped trusting anyone in the woods, even the ones calling her name, because sometimes they didn't sound like they knew her. They sounded like they were practicing. The clinic staff reported that Hannah refused mirrors. She asked for them to be covered. When a nurse forgot, Hannah stared at her reflection for a long time, then started crying silently. What did you see? Laura asked later. Hannah answered, she looks like me, but she's not tired enough. Laura felt a chill. How tired should you look? She asked. Hannah looked at her with hollow eyes. Tired enough to be real. Then Hannah asked a question that shifted the entire room. Did you see her too? See who? Laura asked. The other one. Laura said there was no other one. Hannah slowly shook her head. She was there during the searches. She watched them with me. She stood close. She learned my face. Laura felt her pulse spike. Who is she? Hannah whispered. I don't know. But she learned how to walk like me. The hospital's psychiatric wing was quieter than the emergency department. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where every sound felt watched. Hannah was moved there after her third panic episode. The official reason was observation. The real reason was fear. Not of her, of what she kept saying. Dr. Elaine Porter reviewed Hannah's case for 6 straight hours. Exposure, hypothermia, severe malnutrition, dissociative symptoms, possible trauma-induced psychosis. All reasonable, except for one detail. Hannah knew things, details she should not have known. She correctly described a volunteer search leader who had died 2 years after the search. She knew his limp. She knew the phrase he used to motivate the team. She knew where he liked to stand during briefings. Those details were never public. She described a missing search dog. Not just its name, its collar damage, the way it refused to enter a certain part of the forest. Records confirmed it. When Dr. Porter asked how she knew, Hannah said, I watched them forget me. Laura visited every day. Sometimes Hannah was lucid. Sometimes she was. But the one thing that never changed. Hannah refused to sleep with the lights off. She said the dark reminded her of how they move. Laura finally asked, who is they? Hannah didn't answer right away. Then she said, the ones who wear people. Dr. Porter tried grounding techniques. Asked Hannah to focus on reality. On now. On safety. Hannah nodded. Then asked, why does everyone here smell like trees? The staff laughed it off. Stress hallucinations. Olfactory memory. But Laura noticed something. More and more staff started complaining about a smell. Pine, wet bark, cold air. Maintenance found nothing. Air filters were replaced. Nothing changed. Then one of the night nurses reported something else. She said she saw Hannah standing in the hallway at 3:17 a.m. barefoot, watching the security monitors. When approached, Hannah wasn't there. Hannah's room camera showed her asleep in bed at that exact time. Two places, same minute. They assumed camera error. Until it happened again. And again. Each time. Someone saw Hannah somewhere she wasn't supposed to be. Each time. The footage showed her in bed. Laura confronted Hannah. Hannah didn't deny it. She just looked confused. I didn't go, she said. But she did. Laura's voice dropped. Who is she? Hannah leaned closer. The one who learned. Learned what? How to come back. Dr. Porter ordered a neurological scan. EEG. MRI. Everything normal. Too normal. No signs of damage that matched Hannah's symptoms. It was as if her brain had adapted. Not healed. Adapted. Laura asked Hannah about the forest again. Hannah described watching her own search from a ridge. She said she stood next to a woman who never spoke. A woman who didn't leave footprints. A woman who stood too still. Laura asked, what did she look like? Hannah hesitated. Then said, she looked like me. Laura felt her stomach drop. When? At first, she didn't. But the longer I stayed, she changed. She copied. The staff psychologist suggested identity fragmentation, survivor guilt, projected doubles. But then Hannah said something that made Laura stop writing. She's not done learning. That night, security footage captured something strange. At 2:41 a.m., a figure stood at the end of Hannah's hallway. The cameras recorded it clearly. Female, same height, same build, standing perfectly still. The face was turned away. When security arrived, the hallway was empty. Hannah was in her bed, asleep, breathing. But on the monitor, the figure remained for 4 full minutes, never moving, just watching the camera. The cabin did not exist on any map. That fact alone made every member of the search team uneasy. They had driven nearly 2 hours past the last marked forest road, following a series of hand-drawn directions taken from the journals found in the watch room. The notes referenced the blind ridge, the crooked creek, and the place where the trees lean away from something you cannot see. Each landmark sounded less like geography and more like warning. Yet every description matched something real. The crooked creek twisted sharply around black stones polished smooth as glass. The blind ridge rose suddenly, blocking radio signals and distorting GPS. And then, finally, they reached the trees. They did not grow straight. They laned. All of them angled slightly away from a central clearing, as if something in the middle repelled them. Branches reached outward, bark split in long scars, roots half exposed and twisting away from the soil. At the center sat the cabin. Old, one room, wood so dark it looked burned, though no fire damage was visible. The windows were covered from the inside with nailed boards, except for a narrow horizontal gap in the front window, like someone wanted to look out but not be seen. No footprints in the snow. No animal tracks. No wind movement in the surrounding trees. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Evelyn's photo was in Hannah's hand. The resemblance between the missing woman and the face on the monitor was already disturbing, but standing in front of the cabin, Hannah felt something worse. Recognition, not memory. Something deeper, a physical sense, like her body knew this place even if her mind refused to. Protocol says we wait for daylight, one of the rangers said. Hannah shook her head slowly. She didn't wait, she said. They approached the door. It was unlocked. That alone made the silence heavier. Inside, the air was stale but not abandoned. Dust lay thick on some surfaces, but other areas were clean. The floor near the center of the room was worn smooth, as if someone stood there often. Facing the window, facing outward. A single chair sat in front of the narrow viewing gap. The wood was carved with shallow lines, tally marks, hundreds of them, not in neat rows, scratched in clusters, overlapping, frantic. On the wall beside the chair, someone had written dates. Not normal dates. They matched the dates of Evelyn's disappearance and the days after. Then weeks. Then months. Then years. The writing grew less structured as it went on. The ink changed colors. Some entries were carved instead of written. One phrase repeated more than any other. They look for me, I watch them look. In the corner of the cabin, hidden behind a hanging blanket, they found the equipment. Monitors, old analog recording devices, hard drives stacked in milk crates, and a camera, not pointed inward, pointed out through the window gap. A long-range lens, a perfect view of the forest trail, of the exact path where the original search teams had walked years ago. They connected one of the drives to a portable screen. The footage began to play. Search crews, volunteers, police, rangers. Hannah saw faces she recognized from archived photos. All of them moving through the forest. All of them unaware. Then the camera zoomed slightly. Adjusted by a hand. A woman's hand. Thin. Scarred. Familiar. The timestamp was from 2 years after Evelyn vanished. The woman behind the camera whispered. The audio was faint, distorted. But the words were clear. They still don't see me. Hannah felt her stomach twist. Play the next file, she said. The next video showed the same trail. Different day. Snow heavier. Searchers older. And this time, the whisper continued. I am closer than they think. The camera shifted. For one single frame, Evelyn's face appeared in the reflection of the glass. Older. Thinner. Eyes hollow. Watching. Not the forest. The people searching for her. Behind Hannah, one of the team members quietly turned off their radio. Not because of interference. Because the radio had begun playing faint audio. Voices. Surge chatter. From years ago. Not coming from the forest. Coming from the cabin. From a box labeled in faded marker. Recordings do not erase. The team realized something horrifying. This cabin was not a place of hiding. It was a control room. A viewing station. A front row seat to her own disappearance. And somewhere beyond the trees, something had taught Evelyn how to watch without being found. Something that wanted her to keep watching. The last file on the drive had today's date. They hesitated. Then Hannah pressed play. The screen showed the trail. The same trail. From earlier that morning. Their own footprints in the snow. Their own team approaching the cabin. And in the faint reflection of the window, a second face, standing behind Evelyn's reflection. Not human, not fully visible, but close enough to be watching her watch them. No one spoke after the last frame froze. The second face in the reflection was wrong in ways Hannah struggled to describe later. It wasn't distorted like a glitch or blurred by motion. It was too still, too perfectly positioned behind Evelyn, as if it had been waiting for that exact angle of glass and light. The team rewound the clip, frame by frame. The shape never moved. Its outline was tall and narrow, the head slightly tilted, not in curiosity, but in imitation, like it had learned the posture by watching humans do it. Enhance, one of the texts said, though they all knew it wouldn't help. They tried anyway. The contrast revealed more, not less. Where eyes should have been, there were darker voids, not holes, depth, as if looking into a tunnel instead of a face. And behind that, nothing. No body clearly defined, just a suggestion of shoulders dissolving into shadow that didn't match the angle of the light in the cabin. Hannah closed the laptop. "We are not alone," she said. The words felt inadequate. They catalogued everything in silence: drives, journals, equipment, every tally mark on the chair, every carved date on the wall, every whisper recorded over years of isolation. But the most disturbing discovery came from the floor. Under the chair, scratched so lightly it was almost invisible, were overlapping footprints. Not shoe prints. Bare feet. Small. Adult-sized. And something else. Longer. Thinner. With impressions that looked less like toes and more like pressure points, as if whatever made them didn't distribute weight the way a human foot should. The tracks faced the same direction. Toward the chair. Toward the window. As if something stood beside Evelyn while she watched. Or behind her. Close enough to share the view. The forest outside had gone completely still. No wind. No birds. No insects. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. The radio crackled. Not with static. With voices. Clear. Out of time. Search Team Bravo to base. We've reached the creek bend. Hannah recognized the voice instantly. Her own. From a case briefing recording. From years ago. But she had never been on Evelyn's original search. She wasn't even assigned to the department back then. Yet there it was. Her voice. On a frequency that should have been empty. Another voice cut in. "We are losing signal past the ridge." That one belonged to a ranger who had retired. Then died. The team stared at the radio. The transmission continued. Tracks headed north might be fresh. Hannah felt her throat tighten. Those words hadn't been in any official recording. They were from a private debrief that had never been released. "How is it playing this?" someone whispered. No one answered. They didn't need to. The cabin was not just recording. It was listening, collecting, storing, replaying. Like something had built a library out of human fear, hope, and desperation. Hannah moved to the window gap. She didn't want to, but something in her pulled her there. Through the narrow slit, she could see the trail winding back into the trees. For a moment, it looked normal. Then she noticed what Evelyn must have noticed years ago. From this angle, from this exact position, you could see searchers long before they reached the clearing. You could watch them approach. You could learn their patterns, their routes, their habits. You could stay hidden and always know when they were near. Behind her, the radio changed tone. A new voice. A woman. Weak. Hoarse. Whispering. "They never find me, they only find where I was." Hannah turned slowly. The voice was not coming from the radio. It was coming from the monitors. from a file that was now playing on its own. Evelyn sat in the chair, alive, years older, speaking directly toward the camera, toward whoever would someday watch. "I tried to leave," Evelyn said on screen. "It doesn't like that." She swallowed. "You think you're hiding from the woods. You're not. You're hiding for them, for it." Her eyes shifted slightly to the side. Not toward the camera. Toward someone standing next to her. Something off-screen. "I watch because it lets me," Evelyn continued. "It says if I watch, I can stay." The image glitched. For a second, Evelyn's face was replaced by static. Then the second face appeared again. Closer, filling more of the reflection. And for the first time, its mouth moved. Not to speak, to smile. The monitors went black. The cabin lights flickered, though there were no visible power sources. And outside, in the clearing, fresh footprints appeared in the snow. Not leading in, leading away, as if something had just left the cabin. Walking into the woods, heading toward the path the team would use to return. Not running, not hiding, waiting to be watched again. The team did not speak as they stepped outside the cabin. The snow had begun to fall again. Soft, thick, heavy enough to blur the edges of the world. Fresh enough to erase what had been there moments before. Except for the footprints. They were clear. Too clear. They did not belong to boots. They did not belong to bare human feet. They were elongated, lightly pressed, as if whatever made them barely weighed anything at all. Yet they sank deep, contradicting themselves, just like everything else. The trail led away from the cabin, not toward the road, not toward the known trails, but deeper, toward the old search zones, toward the places marked in red on faded maps. Hannah stood frozen at the edge of the clearing. Her breath fogged the air. Her chest felt tight. She knew this direction, not from memory, from watching, from standing in places she had never physically stood, from seeing through eyes that were not hers. "It wants us to follow," she said. Laura looked at her. "How do you know?" Hannah didn't answer immediately. Then, "Because it learned that's how you bring more people." The forest seemed to lean inward. Not moving, not swaying, but listening. The team leader made the call. They would follow the trail for 1 kilometer. No further. Just enough to confirm. Enough to document. Enough to prove. They moved slowly. Every step felt louder than it should. Snow creaked. Branches cracked. But beneath it all was something else. A low sound. Not wind. Not animals. A distant, almost rhythmic pressure. Like breathing. Deep. Slow. The footprints never wavered. They stayed perfectly centered on the trail. As if the thing wanted to be followed. As if it wanted to be seen. Half a kilometer in, the trail changed. More prints appeared. Human. Boots. Search boots. Old. Weathered. Some overlapping. Some leading nowhere. Some circling trees. Hannah recognized patterns. She had seen them before. On archived footage. On maps. These were paths of people who had searched. Who had gotten tired. Who had gotten scared. Who had turned around. Except these boot prints were fresh. Impossibly fresh. As if the past had been laid on top of the present. One of the team members stopped. There, he said quietly. Between two trees, something hung. A strip of fabric. Faded. Weather-beaten. But unmistakable. A piece of high-visibility search vest. From years ago. They checked the tag. The name was still legible. A volunteer who had quit the program after Evelyn's case. Still alive. Still living hundreds of miles away. Yet his vest was here. Now, the radio crackled again. This time it was not old recordings. It was live. Their own channel. But the voice was wrong. Too calm. Too close. Search team, you're getting warmer. Every radio on every vest lit up at once. The same voice. Same tone. Not distorted. Not glitching. Clear as if someone stood right beside them. Turn left at the fallen pine, the voice said. That's where they always hesitate. The team leader ripped his radio off. Others followed. The forest did not care. The voice continued anyway. Not through the radios. Through the air. From between trees. From behind trunks. From inside the snow. Hannah felt it then. The same pressure she had felt watching footage. The same pull. Not physical. Directional. Like gravity aimed at a specific spot. She stopped walking. Laura grabbed her arm. Hannah, keep moving. Hannah shook her head slowly. It's already watching us, she said. Not like before. Not from the cabin. Laura whispered. From where? Hannah raised her eyes. Not to the trees. Not to the trail. To the space between. To where nothing obvious stood. It learned faces, Hannah said. It learned voices. It learned how to wait. The forest went silent again. Total. Absolute. Then. Footsteps. Not ahead. Not behind. All around. Circling. Measured. Patient. Like a search pattern. But reversed. They were not looking for something lost. They were containing something found. Laura felt a hand brush her jacket. She spun. Nothing. Another team member shouted. Someone screamed. But there was no clear direction. No single source. The sound came from everywhere. And nowhere. Hannah closed her eyes. In the dark, she saw it. Not a creature. Not a monster. A pattern. A shape made of watching. Of copying. Of learning where humans look when they are desperate. Where they stand when they hope. Where they pause when they think they are safe. It didn't hunt. It waited to be searched. So it could learn. So it could wear. So it could stay. Hannah opened her eyes. There are more like Evelyn, she said quietly. They're still watching. Laura swallowed. Watching what? Hannah looked back toward the trail. Toward the way they had come. Toward the world that thought these cases were over. Us, she said. And every future search. The snow fell harder. Covering fresh prints. Erasing old ones. But somewhere deeper in the woods. Something stood still. Learning new routes. New voices. New faces. Waiting for the next name to disappear.